Hello students, this is Brother Tanner, and today we're going to answer a question that we get a lot from students who are just learning about perspective. As you can see from the title slide, we're going to talk about when to use 1-point perspective and when to use 2-point perspective. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, in order to answer our question, you need to know what the term picture plane means, okay? We can imagine a picture plane as being almost like a camera viewfinder or a TV screen that you see the world through. Imagine for a moment the screen of your smartphone as you take a photo. Now zoom in on your screen until the edges reach the edges of your peripheral vision. That's kind of what looking through a picture plane is like. Okay. Now if I looked down straight down on your head and we drew a straight line right through both of your eyes like this, your picture plane is always exactly parallel to that line through your eyes. The four edges of your picture plane would be right where your peripheral vision ends. Now the reality is when we look at the world, our natural viewfinder is actually more of a circle. When you're learning about linear perspective, you learn about the cone of vision, and that's what that circle represents. But since we usually draw what we see onto a rectangular surface, we often think of the picture plane as being rectangular. The picture plane always stays parallel to your eyes, okay? So if the viewer turns his head to the left or the right, then the picture plane is going to turn with it. It always stays right parallel to the eyes. Okay, now that you understand what we mean by picture plane, we can look at some cubes through our picture plane. Here's where it gets simple. If the cubes that I'm looking at are parallel with my picture plane, I can draw them in 1-point perspective, okay? So if I'm looking down on the viewer and he's looking at the 9 cubes that are parallel with his picture plane, he can draw them in 1-point perspective, and the drawing is going to look something like this. If we turn the cubes so that they are no longer parallel with his picture plane, then he can draw them in 2-point perspective, and the drawing looks like this. Simple, right? So what if we turn one cube? Let's take this front one and make it red just so that we can keep track of it, okay? Let's turn this cube back parallel with the viewer. So now he simply draws this one cube in 1-point perspective, and all of the others he draws in 2-point perspective, and the drawing looks like this, right? Which brings us to the answer to another question which I'm often asked: can you combine 1-point perspective and 2-point perspective in one drawing? And the answer is absolutely, just like we did here. In fact, people do it every day. It's often done. So here's a photo of some boxes. I want you to tell me, do you draw these in 1-point perspective or 2-point perspective? Since the fronts of these are parallel to the picture plane, we're going to draw them in 1-point perspective, right? Okay, so how about these? As you can see, none of these cubes are parallel to our picture plane, so we're going to draw those in 2-point perspective, right? Okay, so now that you have the simple part down, let me just throw you one little curveball. When we drew the 9 cubes in 2-point perspective, we used 2 vanishing points to draw them all, right? That's because they were all in alignment with each other, or what we refer to as they're square with one another. When we turn one of them, since it's not square with the others, it's going to get its own set of 2 vanishing points, okay? In other words, I draw all of these guys using 2 vanishing points, and this one guy gets his own set of 2 vanishing points because he's not square with the others. So, if we go back to our photo of these boxes, you can see that not only do we draw them in 2-point perspective, but each one will get its own 2 sets of vanishing points, okay? That's because they're not square with each other. Here's another important thing as well. All the vanishing points, no matter how many, will be located on the same horizon line. You never have more than one horizon line. That's because a horizon line, or also known as your eye level, is exactly that, the level of your eyes. I suppose if you were a Star Wars alien and had 2 sets of eyes and one set was above the other or something like that, you could have 2 eye levels. But since most human eyes just sit on one level, we don't get multiple horizon lines, okay? Now if any of this is confusing, feel free to watch the video again until it makes more sense. And as always, don't be afraid to ask your instructor or your other classmates any questions that you have as well, okay? Okay, take care.